totally uncertified, completely nerdified psychology friend. At least I thought we were friends. I'm just kidding. Today, oh wait, just to clarify first, so as I pointed out in the intro, I am not certified professionally. I don't have any licenses or anything like that. My thing is, I've just always had a huge passion for psychology. I love doing research, et cetera, et cetera. I am in school, so I have taken classes in psychology, that kind of stuff. But like I said, no certification. So today I'm going to be talking about eating disorders. And I want to make it really clear that there are so many different types of eating disorders out there. Maybe, or probably some that we don't even know about. We don't even have any research or data on yet. I'm sure lots and lots more are going to be coming out of the woodwork. But, and I'm going to cover, the other ones that aren't in this video, but I'm going to do it in a later video. Because the ones I'm going to be covering here are anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. Now, I think that these are probably the most well-known eating disorders, and who knows what the reason for that is. I think that according to data and research, they're the most common ones, meaning more people have those eating disorders compared to the lesser known ones. But we have to question everything, right? Who knows if that is reality or because I feel like it's self-reported and it's diagnoses and people being diagnosed and that kind of stuff. So maybe with the other ones it's just being hidden more, and so it's not being reported as much. Who knows? I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying we got to question everything. For this particular video, I'm going to be going over the DSM diagnostic criteria for anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. Now, it's important to note that for each of these illnesses, you need to fit all the criteria listed, meaning for anorexia, there's A, B, and C. For bulimia, there is A through D. And for binge eating disorder, it's A through E. Now, maybe under, certain criteria, like let's say under a letter B, there's, something that says you need to fit 3 of these different indicators and out of 5, and so you only have to fit 3 out of there in order to meet that requirement, that B requirement. But then, like I said, all the letters need to be satisfied in order to receive the diagnosis. So yeah, and we're going to start with anorexia. So the first criteria for anorexia is a restriction in energy intake, meaning food. And this restriction leads to a significantly low body weight. And how they're looking at this is what does significantly lower mean, right? So it's viewed in the context of the person's age, sex, developmental trajectory, physical health. All these different factors are kind of taken into account. And what they're looking at is, okay, what would be normal or expected for a person, let's just do an example, for a person in their 20s who is 5'5", who has had this, past weight history, whatever. That's an example of what they would look like. And so they compare the expected to where this person is at. And like I said, it's significantly lower for someone with anorexia. Now, I want to say, pet peeve of mine is how people will think automatically that if you're a normal weight, it's normal, or higher than, average or expected, whatever, that you couldn't possibly be suffering from any type of anorexia. That's a myth. There's something called atypical anorexia, and we're going to go into that in another video. But I just want to make that clear because I feel like it's very invalidating for people who are struggling still with restrictive type behaviors and, you know, some of the other symptoms in anorexia, for them to just be told, well, no, you know, you're just trying to be something you're not, or, you know, whatever. So, okay, I'm getting that out of the way. So the next criteria is an intense fear of gaining weight, and along this will come with behaviors that, you know, are meant to avoid gaining any weight. And I would list examples of these behaviors, but I also don't want to maybe put any, like, people who are maybe suffering in the moment, or, you know, I don't want to be putting out like unhealthy, you know, it could be viewed to some people as like tips, you know, oh, so this is how people can avoid weight. You know, I don't want to go there. So I'm not going to give examples for that one. But yeah, so an overwhelming, just intense fear, you know, despite these individuals being underweight or being a low weight, you know, and I think all types of mental disorders, you know, these people are suffering. This is very, very painful for them. It takes over their whole life. You know, just a large part of their thinking is put onto this. You know, so people with eating disorders, any type of mental health disorders, you know, these people need help, and these people need compassion and understanding. So I want to commend any of you guys tuning into my videos, because you're educating yourself on this stuff, and that's awesome. So the third criteria is a distorted body image. You know, someone who's very thin could be looking in the mirror and they just see someone who's just completely not what they look like. Let's go there. I try to be very careful with, you know, with different terms, because certain terms can be very triggering for people. You know, like if I were to say, oh, when they're looking in the mirror, they see someone who's huge. I'm not saying that being huge and all that type of stuff, I'm not trying to shame that in any way. So I just want to make that clear. These are just, I'm trying to use them as very neutral terms just to describe what's going on. But obviously, I mean, I think for a lot of people with eating disorders, no matter what, no matter how much I try to paint it as something neutral, just to, you know, use to describe something, it could be really triggering or overwhelming, you know? So along with this too, their self-worth can also be tied to their weight, you know? Stepping on the scale that day, that could determine how they feel all week about themselves. And I think it can be hard for a lot of them to look at other areas of their life, you know, like maybe you're a really, really good friend, or very good in school, super smart. I feel like I'm describing myself. I'm just kidding. But the person can have so many amazing traits, and the illness will completely disregard any of that. And it's just, okay, how much did I weigh this week? How much did I eat this week? What do I look like in this outfit? What about this one? Wait, what size am I? What does measuring tape say? All of that will just cloud the thinking. And it's completely overwhelming, and it's totally unfair, because we all have unique traits. We all have things that make us us. We are all so much more than our weight. But these illnesses and cultural messages, all of that kind of stuff, they just completely make those things feel like they don't matter. Also, a denial of the seriousness, you know, that can also be another indicator, you know, of this disease. Like, oh, no, like I'm just dieting, or, you know, making excuses to other people, making excuses to themselves, you know, and so that's for the third criteria. And with those three that I just listed under the third criteria, you know, the distorted body image, not taking it seriously, denial, and, you know, the weight being tied to self-worth, those are all like or statements. You know, any of those would put you under having the third criteria. So another thing, a really important thing to note is that there's two types of anorexia, two types that fall under this specific type, not the atypical. That's, like I said, for another video. But for this anorexia, the two types are restricting type and binging and purging type. So for restricting type, it's, you know, restriction of food and, you know, diet, exercise, you know, compulsive exercise, you know, all of that type of stuff to, you know, control the weight. And the difference between that type and binging and purging type is, and hold on, let me just explain like what binging and purging is. So binging and purging is where the person will overeat, and what's considered a binge, like generally could be, you know, eating a significantly larger amount of food than what would be considered normal in a very, very short period of time. And like I said, I would give an example, but that can be triggering to some. So I'm not going to mention, you know, that type of stuff. But that's just generally how you can think of it as a binge. And then after the binge, they purge. And purging could either be excessive exercise, it could be, you know, vomiting, laxative use, diuretics, fasting right afterwards. Like, you know, let's say they have a binge and then they don't eat for like 2 days after, you know, in an attempt to purge those calories, to purge the binge. So, and in order to be classified as binge purge type, we look at, okay, within the last 3 months, has there been a reoccurring pattern of them doing this? If so, you fall under that category. If, you know, it's not there, then you're restricting type. And obviously, you know, you can go back and forth with them. You know, maybe 6 months out of the year it's one, and that's the other one. So, yeah, so that is anorexia. And if you guys have any questions about that one specifically, let me know. Any comments, anything you want to add, any corrections, you know, if you see something wrong, totally let me know. But for now, we're going to move on to bulimia. So like I mentioned before, I mentioned binging and purging. With this disorder, binging and purging is the hallmark, meaning the criteria for this are the individual has to engage in binging behaviors, and like I said before, this is eating a very large portion of food than what would be considered, you know, or than what would be done maybe in a similar situation, in a similar context, in a short period of time. And a big hallmark of binging is feeling out of control, feeling like you just can't stop reaching for things, and it's an insatiable urge. And so that covers the binge part of it. The second part, or the second criteria, is inappropriate, reoccurring, compensatory behaviors done after the binge. Once again, vomiting, laxatives, fasting, diuretics, medications, exercise, specific types of medications purposely done for the intent of purging. So the third criteria is binging and purging both occur on average at least once a week for 3 months. For some reason, that number 3 is very important to them. So not important to the creator, the DSM. So that's the, you know, kind of timing that they view it as. And like I said, you know, binging and purging in any amount can really impact the sufferer. And like I said, we'll go into, you know, different types of eating disorders another video. criteria D, or the fourth one, is self-evaluation is influenced by weight. You know, kind of like what we talked about with anorexia. Um, you know, the scale can kind of, it can be attached, not kind of, the scale is, in some cases, very much attached to your self-worth. Or for other people, it could be, you know, what size you are. Or, you know, or maybe you compare yourself to others. And if you're not the smallest one in the room, that can totally impact your self-esteem. There was an eating disorder sufferer where, and all of these, like, because I know, like, in my OCD video and stuff, I'll bring up stuff that people have told me. I ask for permission first before, you know, sharing this stuff with you guys. So I just want to let you know that, because boundaries are really important. So, you know, they were in treatment actually, and a woman walked in who she felt, you know, was thinner than her or whatever, and she got so overwhelmed and so like just obsessive with it. She couldn't stop like texting, you know, one of the other girls there saying, hey, do you think she's like skinnier? Like, you know, and it was just like, just so, it overtook her. And it was really hard to stop thinking about it. It affected that whole day for her. You know, so, I mean, this stuff is just, it's really, really serious. Oh, and just to circle back to criteria C, where we're talking about, you know, okay, they have to be doing it once a week for 3 months. Another important thing to attach there is it doesn't fit the binging and purging anorexia criteria. So, you know, it's important that for solely bulimia diagnosis, it's fitting, you know, these criteria that I'm listing specifically for this disorder. We're talking about binging and purging. I'm going to do like a little like air written chart, like for the categorization of severity levels for bulimia. Now, once again, I don't really like how they say, okay, if you're doing it this amount, then you're considered this level, and et cetera, because no matter what, even if you have what's considered the mildest, you know, form of bulimia or most extreme, whatever, it's not a competition. It doesn't mean one person is sick or sicker than another. You know, this is just how I view it, as just purely numbers, maybe to just gauge, you know, what you need to work on, or, you know, whatever. You know, but I hate how this format can kind of invalidate people. But, you know, this is what's listed. So in order to be considered a mild form, they have to be binging and purging an average of 1 to 3 times a week. For moderate, an average of 4 to 7. Severe, 8 to 13 times. And extreme is 14 or more binging and purging episodes within 1 week. So, yeah, so that's the criteria for bulimia. Now, moving on to binge eating disorder. The first criteria is the presence of binge eating behavior. You know, like I said, eating a large portion of food in a relatively short period of time. The hallmarks of binges are a loss of control, or feeling a lack of control over your eating, feeling like you're just not able to stop. And the second criteria is for a binge. This is, you know, the criteria specified for a binge. It's associated with 3 or more of the following. So eating more rapidly, eating until the person is uncomfortably full, eating when not hungry, eating, you know, alone, maybe because of fear of judgment, embarrassment. You know, eating disorders are very isolated, or very isolating for the sufferer. There's a lot of shame connected. And the last one is feeling disgusted after a binge episode. So the third criteria is marked distress over, your binging behaviors. Just, it's causing you a lot of emotional pain. And and I feel like society, there's a lot of shame towards people who are overweight, and I think that can contribute to the distress and, and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, just culture. Culture can be really hard on people who are suffering, and I don't approve of that. And obviously, everybody should care about what I do and don't approve of because I mean, who could not? Yeah. Um, that was a joke. So, anyway, the fourth criteria is this binge must occur once a week for 3 months. So, a third of a baby. And the next criteria is there's no purging afterwards. The only thing going on here is the binge eating part. And the severity levels for binge eating disorder episodes and bulimia episodes are the same. So that's how they kind of gauge the severity. There's a lot of different, anything can be a trigger when we're talking about these types of disorders. Maybe feeling unhappy, anxious, maybe the person's feeling bored, and so, the food is kind of, it's to numb, all those types of things. Maybe your relationship, if you get into a fight with someone, or maybe, let's say you're in a really unhealthy relationship. Instead of, moving away from that, maybe your defense mechanism, maybe it was developed in childhood, who knows? Portion of it could be genetic. You just run and you eat, and that comforts you. And that just kind of will serve as a mask. And, I think when we have these types of addictive behaviors where we turn to something else, it kind of makes us feel like, okay, well, this isn't that bad. I can just go and feel numbed out, and then, and then I'll go back to the unhealthy relationship, So that's another example of what I mean by this disorder can impact so many areas of your life. It can keep you from growing. And now what I want to cover is just like a little bit, this is kind of moving away from DSM and kind of going more into possible reasons why this type of stuff will go on. So, okay, let's go with anorexia. As brought up before, cultural factors. These messages that, thin is good, thin is admired, a lot of models. And it's getting better, what we're showing in television and the fashion world. But, I mean, there's still a lot of, thinness promoted. And I also want to say there are some people who are just naturally thin. And so, they may go into modeling because maybe they grew up being bullied because they're just naturally skinny. And so the modeling is, it's a good thing for them. But some are struggling with eating disorders. I read, and I mean, this is just one study, that people in the fashion industry, models, as many as 40% of them are struggling with some type of eating disorder. So, you guys are definitely not alone. But, cultural factors, possibly maybe in the home, you were pressured to keep a certain weight. Maybe you were put on a diet. Maybe, who knows, maybe you're overweight and maybe struggling with binging when you were younger. And also, I want to clarify, being overweight, that doesn't automatically mean you have binge eating disorder. But some people who are overweight do have it. So maybe when you were younger, your parents put you on a diet, trying, thinking that they were doing the best thing, but they were really sending you all of these messages that they either did realize but didn't care that they were sending you, or they just, they're just oblivious, um, which unfortunately happens. Maybe bullying as well. Maybe when you were younger, you were made to feel like you had to look a certain way by your peers. Um, there's all types of different factors. Another thing that I don't think there's been a lot of research on, but fasting can, just from the physiological impact it can have on you, it can make you feel like a high. You release endorphins, you can enter something called a ketonic state. So for certain people, anorexia and the fasting restrictive stuff, it's a way to, like, it can almost be viewed as like a drug addiction. You're searching for that high. And another thing too is, I think, for some people with bipolar disorder, they could be fasting, and I'll do a whole video on bipolar disorder, but there's a state within bipolar disorder called hypomania, which is where a person has more energy, they feel more euphoric, etc. Stress, can impact, either exacerbate or induce bipolar episodes. And so because hypomania feels so good, somebody could, be using the restrictive stuff in order to send themselves into that state. And then obviously, like I said, to be considered anorexia, you have to have all, the criteria. So somehow that stuff, it's multifactored, Um, so, yeah, so that's for anorexia. For bulimia, it's, and like I said, everybody's reasoning is different. There's different things going on. But with bulimia, there's a very, a strong connection with addiction. Like people who suffer with bulimia, it's common for them to have a drug or alcohol problem. And bulimia is seen as like, and it can be seen as an addiction. When they're eating, they get a high from eating the food. Food is their drug. And when they're purging, you can, because physiologically how purging can affect you, you can get a high after you throw up, or same thing with like exercise. So it's a chemical thing too for many of them. And, once again, we go into societal messages, societal factors. Maybe you were trying to diet, but you were doing it so, like, excessively, and you weren't nurturing your body and doing it healthily. And so you're just so hungry that, you end up binging. And then you feel all this shame afterwards, so you go and you purge, and then it can become a cycle. So, there's lots of different things that could be going on here. Like I brought up with binge eating, it could be a way to, like, maybe if the person is going through a really rough time, that's when their bulimia is at its most severe for them. And research and things that I've read, they say that bulimia is associated a lot with people pleasing, wanting people to like them. A lot of people who people please, they are concerned about abandonment. They have a low self-worth. They're concerned with what others think. They don't view their needs as important. And so, that's very isolating in and of itself. And so the binging and purging can kind of just help them numb, the feelings that can develop from not being able to set boundaries and, all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, this stuff is multifactored. And for binge eating, like I mentioned before, with triggers, maybe some of that stuff is what triggered it to begin with. Maybe you got into an abusive relationship and the only way to cope was just to keep eating. Um, Another thing too is, and this is also true for anorexia, is in some cases maybe you were raped or sexually assaulted, and so you don't want to be attractive to others because you don't want someone to do that to you again. So you starve yourself so that you know lose the body fat, that type of stuff. The estrogen levels, whatever. Or it could be in males too, so that you just look less sexually attractive. Same with binge eating. You know, um, you could just want to completely hide yourself because somebody took advantage of you in that way and did that to your body. So, it's a defense that people can go to. Um, you know, Maybe your parents had unhealthy eating behaviors. Maybe you're predisposed to have addiction, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it's sad because we got it's like it's coming at you from all angles. And another thing too is there's also thought to be a genetic component for all these different illnesses. Like I read for anorexia, they and who knows, we can't know anything for sure, but the theory was there's a gene that makes it easier for them to starve themselves, or when they are fasting and restricting, their body and brain has a different reaction compared to somebody who doesn't have anorexia. Like if these two, someone who doesn't have this, the gene, and then someone who does, when they're fasting, it can, it affects their brain and, wiring, etc., in a completely different way. So that can also be a factor. Um, so yeah. So like I said, self-love is really, really important. And with eating disorders, either before the disorder or during it or afterwards, you know, there's a sense that maybe, oh, I'm not good enough. Maybe if I eat, less and can change my figure, or, if I numb myself with food, use my drug, I can feel better. And, you know, it can be a cry for help in a lot of ways. Um, and so it's really, really important. One of the biggest things I think in recovery from eating disorders is developing self-love, self-care, looking at different parts of you and trying to find the beauty in you. And when I say trying, I just mean it's difficult for eating disorder patients. It's difficult for a lot of them to do that. I'm not saying it's hard for, to, I'm saying we're all lovable. Oh my gosh. So I think that, whatever happened to you, bullying, trauma, and even if you don't have any of that, but just for some reason your brain caught on to this. Like, for instance, obsessive compulsive disorder is associated with, or obsessive tendencies too, with anorexia. And you can think of it like this. So they become obsessed with a certain number on a scale. Like, once I reach this weight, everything's going to be okay. And then they hit that weight, and then it becomes another thing of obsession of like, wait, that wasn't good enough, so it's compulsively setting these weights for certain people. And no matter how low it gets, you know. And another thing about anorexia I want to add is it's listed, from what I read, as the mental illness that has the highest rate of mortality, of death. Because, I mean, when you're not eating, you can't think, and your system starts shutting down. Your organs can start shutting down. It messes around with the heart, and bulimia messes around with the heart too. So does binge eating. You guys are breaking, my heart, but you're also hurting your hearts. So it's, it's really scary. and say you guys are all lovable. You know, you guys all have amazing traits, unique gifts that you bring to the table. And a woman, or a professor of mine for a psychodrama class, she was saying, you know, because I think creativity, it's kind of associated with things like, oh, like acting, painting, you know, whatever, like kind of artsy type stuff. But my professor, she was like, everybody is creative. Like, think about a chemist, you know, who maybe is viewed as more like rational, etc. But they're mixing around those chemicals, you know, looking at those different bonds. They're creating stuff with that. Um, you know, so it's just really, really important to love yourselves. And I'm gonna do another video on anorexia and bulimia. I just didn't want to like overwhelm you guys with too much data in one video, where you know I cover more causes, more treatments, all that kind of stuff. Um, so anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, you know, we all just need to have a big hug. I mean, unless you're not like an affection person, you're just like, dude, shut the fuck up. Stop telling me all this shit. Stop, like, I don't need it. Okay, and for those of you, I'm sorry. But yeah, but this is just how I feel. So anyway, if you guys like this video, please hit the like button if you want. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing more videos from me. Like I said, this is a very mental health focused channel, but I also do skits and, you know, that type of stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day or night or afternoon.